Today we're going to be changing an ignition and an ignition lock cylinder in a 2001 Honda Accord standard transmission. This process can be used for 1998 to 2002 Honda Accords with a standard transmission.
Alright, so before we get started, I just want to let you guys know, so you're fully aware, this is for educational purposes only. I'm not responsible if you cause any damage to your vehicle. If you follow the steps the way I show them to you, you shouldn't cause any harm, but yeah, I'm not responsible for any damage. And also, before you start this job, you're going to need to make sure that you have your ignition and your key already programmed to each other. Another thing you're going to have to do is Honda, as far as I know, are the only ones that can do it, have a computer that they have to plug into your OBD2 port, and they actually have to rewrite your ECU to the new key and the new ignition.
And the purpose of this video is if you've experienced your key getting stuck in the ignition, it's not turning over all the time, your car is randomly shutting off, and it's due to ignitions. This is the problem. My particular problem is I have a tumbler that's gone bad, and you can't just replace the tumbler in this model of car. You actually have to replace the entire unit. Okay, so before we start, we need to make sure that we have all the proper tools for this job. It's not many, but the ones that are required are extremely important. You're going to need a flathead screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver, some sort of socket wrench. You're going to need an extension, and you're going to need a 14mm socket. Most important tool right here, you're going to need a 10mm metal cutting chisel. You can find this at Lowe's. I bought a pack of them for about $10. You need this to do this job. 10mm wrench. This is to disconnect the battery. I have an aftermarket battery. Your wrench size may be different, but just disconnect it. Pair of vice grips and a good hammer. Alright, so first step we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pop the hood. So you just lift this latch right here and the hood will pop. Mine's already popped. Okay, we're going to go ahead and disconnect the battery. You can decide to disconnect the hot or the negative if you choose to. I'm just going to go ahead and do my negative because I have multiple things connected to my hot terminal. Okay, so what you want to do now is you need to take this bottom panel off here. You also need to take the panel off of the steering column. It's in two pieces. You can see where it's split together. I already have it loose. You're going to take off your top piece. And the first thing you want to do is your fuse panel door. You're going to go ahead and open that up. And there are two screws you need to loosen. You need to loosen this one right here, and you need to loosen this one right here. Those two screws hold this panel on. Once you got them loose, you just take your hand, there's a gap right here where your hands can go up, and you just pull it down, and this whole bottom piece should come off. There are three screws you need to loosen under your column. One's there, the other one is there, the last one is down there. Once you have those loose, this gap right here where you have your turn signal at, you just pull apart. You pull this up and pull this down at the same time, and these will separate. Okay, so once you've taken the paneling off of the top, we've taken it off down here. We've also taken off the fuse panel door right here. So what you want to do is you want to loosen this nut right here. It's right below your turn signal. You just look straight down, and there it is. There's one there. You're going to use your 14mm socket, and you can see now why I said deep, because it's a little bit up there. The other one is right there. You can see it right behind that harness. And if you look directly up from your stock ignition, follow it down, there it is. So once we loosen those two nuts, it's going to allow the entire steering column to rest practically on the seat. And the reason we need to do that is right now, this steering wheel, it's laid down as far as it's going to go, and that's not going to give us enough room. These two right here, we need to get rid of these. What makes this job so tricky, the hardest part, is just getting those off. Honda came up with an idea. It is a good idea, but it's a pain in the ass to the owner if he ever decides to do the job. Pretty much what happens is it's a 8mm bolt, and after enough torque is put on that bolt, the head snaps off, leaving it with this, which kind of looks like a carriage bolt. And the reason they do that is so it's not easy to steal the vehicle. Okay, so now we got the bolts off, and the way it's going to look after you get them off is the steering column is going to drop all the way down. And see, now that it's dropped down, we have easy access. We can get right to it. And you can buy this at your local auto parts store. I actually picked this up at Lowe's. What this is this is a metal cutting chisel. It's a 10mm, I believe. Yeah, 10mm. And the idea behind it is that you take it, you set it here on the head that you need to get loose. See, and then you just hit it constantly. You keep hitting it for a few minutes. You see how I've made a head mark there now? Like a flat head mark? And once that's made, then you can just come in with your flathead screwdriver, because you've made the hole for it. And let's see. And now we just loosen it, and out she comes. Should be able to get it. Yep. See, and there it is. Yeah. So you just make a flathead mark in it. That way you can take a screwdriver. And then yeah, it worked. It didn't even. It might have taken me maybe 5 minutes, if that. And then that's the down portion right there, without the head in it. Okay, now what we're gonna do, I just took a pair of vice grips and just bent it so it's about to come off. If you're gonna replace the whole ignition, you might as well. And I took the turn signal and the windshield wipers off. They're right there, the harnesses. It's just easier to get to it. Next thing you want to do is you want to take out your ignition harness, which is that brown one right there. We need to unplug that, and it's this cord that runs up right here under and up until the ignition, because it's not going to come off until we get rid of that. Okay, so now we got it unplugged from the fuse box. Now what we need to do is, we've got a couple of ties holding this on to some other cords. We're going to go ahead and cut that so we can get this off. Okay, so now as you can see, it's dangling. The only thing that's still holding it on is the immobilizer wires, which we're going to disconnect because we're going to transfer our immobilizer over to the new ignition. Another thing that I found when pulling this off, even after you have it loose, you're going to feel it not want to fall down. It's kind of like a struggling. I struggle with it for a bit. What it is this little harness right here. It plugs in right here. And because these are so tight, and because they're laying right underneath the ignition, it's pretty much cradling it. This one right here, the one that is right beside, it's this black one right here. I'm not messing with it because it's a yellow wire, and from what I've read in the forums, that is actually the airbag wire. I may be wrong, but I'm not taking a chance with that. I'm not so sure, even with the battery disconnected, what would happen if I disconnected that wire. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take the immobilizer off, finish taking the rest of this ignition off. We're going to put it on our new ignition. Alright, and there you have it. There's our ignition. Old ignition off. And this is the immobilizer right here. This is what we're going to be transferring over to our new ignition. All it is one Phillips head screwdriver right there, and one Phillips screwdriver. I'm going to take that off right there. Okay, so we got our new keys and our new ignition. We've checked it to make sure that everything is identical, and we're going to go ahead and put the immobilizer on. Okay, so here's the immobilizer. We've gone ahead and taken it off. We're going to put it on our new ignition. It was just those two small screws like I showed you. They're right there on the table. One goes right here in this slot. The other one goes right there in that slot. So we're going to go ahead and transfer it. Okay, so now we have the immobilizer on the ignition. This is how you want it to be. So it's going to be on the vehicle like this. The immobilizer is going to fit over just like that. That screw right there, that brass one, it actually holds it to the body This one down here just lets the other parts of the ignition behind the immobilizer come loose. Like here's the stock one right here. This is what it looks like without an immobilizer on. And then these little pieces actually just come off of it. So the immobilizer holds on to all that. So the new, old. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and put this on the car. When you're lining it up, that little knuckle, that little notch right there, that's for if you when you turn the wheel all the way to the right or the left when the car's off, it locks up. You're gonna see a notch. It's right there in the column. This is just gonna go right back into it. Okay, so now we've got everything hooked back up again. Let's drop this down. The only thing we need to do is we need to torque those bolts so the heads come off, but we got that locked up. All of our harnesses are plugged back up. We got this harness plugged back up. This one here, don't forget, under the car there was this one right here. We didn't disconnect this one because this one was the airbag. Also secured the steering wheel column nuts as well. Make sure you put those back up. We got a green glowing light, so we know we're getting power. And we have our harness plugged back in up there on the fuse panel. So, before we go ahead and torque down those bolts, we're just going to go ahead with our new key, which you either had programmed at Honda or you had programmed at an auto parts store. We're going to go ahead and put it in the ignition. Alright, so the fuel pump, that's good. The fuel pump engaged, that means it's ready to go. We don't have a green flashing immobilizer light up there. So let's see if we can start it. And there it is. So there you go. And you'll see it when I turn it off. That's the green immobilizer light. If your key wasn't programmed, it would constantly keep doing that when you had your key in the start position. Alright, so we're just going to go ahead and torque these bolts down so that the head snaps off. I'll let you see what that looks like. Oh, there it goes. I just felt it. And you can see the head right there, how it just snapped off. And that's it right there. And that's what it looks like now with the head snapped off. Just like the one before, like a carriage bolt. And that's the one we still haven't torqued down yet. Okay, so now we have both the bolts locked down. So we're good to go. All we have to do is just put all the paneling back on again. Alright, and we're all set. We got our casing back on. Back here too. We've locked up the bolts down here that hold the column on, or the screws I should say. This down piece paneling is snapped back on. We put our fuse panel back on, and don't forget, when you're putting this bottom piece back on, the two screws that you took out, you need to put them back in. It's that one right there, the small black one is going to go right there, and then there's going to be a brass gold one with a washer. That one is right there. Alright, thanks guys for watching. Alright, so closing notes. Hopefully you've got the job done. It only took me about an hour and 15, I want to say, somewhere around there. It didn't take very long. You'll notice that there's different lighting between one scene and the next. That's because the steps that I actually did them at different parts of the day. I kind of started it at night, and then I backed off just because I was losing light, and I had the weekend off and just finished the rest of it the following day. Now, I did mention earlier in the video that I was going to explain how your security system with the immobilizer actually works. So we're going to go over that right now. So pretty much your key, it has a transponder that's right behind the Honda logo in this plastic,
and it's programmed to your ECM in your vehicle. Now, the reason why the immobilizer was so important and you had to transfer it over is because that immobilizer piece is actually unique. No immobilizer is the same. Every immobilizer is unique to their own vehicle, a different Accord, CR-V, whatever the Honda, Acura model may be. That's why you need to have that, because that goes hand in hand with the vehicle, and it also helps program this key. So that's pretty much how that works. Really, when you put the key in, the car checks with the ECM to see if the transponder, the pretty much little chip in your key, if it's sending the right signal. If it doesn't understand that signal, like even let's say you take like another Accord key, and even if it's cut perfectly so it fits in your ignition and you can even turn it over, your car's not going to start, because it's not going to recognize that chip when it asks the ECM if it's okay to start. ECM is kind of like the brains, if you didn't know what that is. And what it does is it doesn't allow the fuel pump to engage. So when you try to start your car, it'll crank and crank and crank and crank, but it's not going to fire over because it's not getting fuel to produce spark. With that said, one thing that I'd really like to make clear about this entire job, I mentioned it in the very beginning before we even got started, but whatever you do, do not just go ahead and put your new ignition in your car and try to start it, because it's not going to work. You have to, absolutely have to get the key with the ignition programmed to the ECM of your car. Honda is gonna have to do this, or some shop that has the software that Honda uses. They use a USB cable that comes from their computer, and at the other end it's an OBD2. If you guys don't know what that is, that's like when you get a check engine light and you go to AutoZone or whatever and they plug this little diagnostic tool in, that little piece that's normally underneath your dash by your gas pedal. That's what an OBD2 is. And what it does is it rewrites the ECM to program your ECM, the brains of the car, to learn the new key and to learn the new ignition. If you go ahead and you put it in, you can try to start it, but like I said before, it'll crank and crank and crank, but because the ECM does not recognize that chip, it's not going to engage the fuel pump, because your car is going to think it's being stolen. If you don't want to pay for towing costs, if you want to just go ahead and do the new ignition, what I'd recommend you do is go ahead and kind of do half the job. So loosen the security bolts on your old ignition, the bad one, because that is the hardest part of this job. If you can get those off, it's a cakewalk from there, because everything else is just basic mechanic sense and unplugging and plugging back in harnesses. That's it, and really just having the right tools. So go ahead and loosen those, and once you've got those loosened, then you can just drive it on up to Honda. Go in the parking lot, just somewhere. I mean, I'm sure they'd be cool with it. I don't know why. I don't see why they wouldn't be. And just make sure the bolts before you left to go to Honda are like loose, so you can just take them off with your fingers, and then putting the new one back on. It only takes maybe about 5 minutes. And then they'll just roll a computer out to your car and reprogram it right there. So you're looking at $170. That's at least what I paid, versus $707. That was the cheapest estimate I got, and surprisingly, the cheapest estimate was from the Honda dealership. The part alone, I think they wanted $280. I checked with Advance, they wanted $170, and they said they couldn't even get the part because it's like a special order or something like that. And then the labor was crazy too. I think the labor was $400 or something. Really, I mean, you guys saw the video. It takes like an hour and 15 minutes, and you can do it. So save time, save money, do it yourself. All right, like I said, if you have any more questions, just send me a comment below, and I'll try to help you the best I can.